Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Ultra Confusion interview. This time we have the author, Louis Puster III, in studio. Say hello.
Hi. Hi.
All right, so Louis, of course, is the author of all these fine books, and we're going to talk about these books, but in just a second. So, first off, who is Louis Puster III?
Me. I'm Louis Puster III.
That's it. That's all you got for me.
No. So I'm a guy who's worked in a lot of different places, a lot of different fields.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that's been constant with me is telling stories.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, I used to tell my younger sibling, stories to keep them entertained. When I was in high school, I was writing stories and poetry for magazines.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been doing this, but not really trying to accomplish anything big. Like, writing a novel is big.
Right.
People who write know that writing a novel is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that everybody can do. But I just kind of, one day I was sitting on a couch and working on a project for a friend, and it felt like lightning struck me, and I had to write one.
Mm-hmm.
And so it happened.
Right.
But, I mean, you know, if you're asking about who I am,
mm-hmm.
I'm just some guy, really. I'm not a celebrity. I'm not somebody, you know, really, really super smart. I'm not anything like that. I'm just a guy with, you know, people that live in his brain.
Mm-hmm. Hey, it's no problem with that. I got no issue with that. All right, so of course your series is called the Saga of Ukumog.
Yep.
So what can you tell us without the spoilers? Because I mean I've already read all of them, so you can't tell me anything I don't. Well, actually, you could tell me something I don't know, but you're not going to.
That's right.
So
no
tell
spoilers.
us. So tell us about the series.
Okay, so the series is. I'm going to give you my normal pitch here.
Go for it.
The series is a dark fantasy series.
Mm-hmm.
It's set in a fantasy world, you know, with magic and swords, much like a world like Middle Earth,
mm-hmm.
or something like the Robert Jordan Wheel of Time series.
Mm-hmm.
It's a world like that is in a bad place,
okay.
You might say.
Right.
The bad guys won. You know, all these worlds have one thing in common, and that was that there was a giant epic conflict where real evil
mm-hmm.
appeared on the scene, and the heroes rose to challenge it. And even in Middle of Earth, they failed a couple times to defeat the bad guys. But right. in this particular world, the bad guys really kicked everyone's ass.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been in charge of the world for generations,
mm-hmm.
and the world is corrupted, and it's bad. It's not great for people, really.
Right.
And the story itself follows a guy who has a sort of disjointed and confusing and somewhat disturbing dream,
mm-hmm.
and then wakes up underground, digs themselves out of what appears to be a shallow grave, and discovers that they're not entirely alive. They're not it's not a zombie, they're not a vampire, none of that stuff.
Right.
But he's definitely undead, and he doesn't know anything about who he is.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know anything about the world. He doesn't know how he's connected to anything,
mm-hmm.
apart from the dream that he had. And since the books are written in first person, you only know as much as he does about everything,
right?
Including how other people are thinking and whether or not they're being honest
right.
about anything. And you're locked into his paranoia and his distrust and his neuroses throughout mm-hmm. the series of the books.
That is one thing that I have to say that it took a little bit of time to get used to the fact that I could, because a lot of the books, they cheat just ever so slightly to go, they look like they're telling a lie or something. You know, yeah. The author tries to hint just to kind of keep the stuff going. But with this one, it really is, you're inside this guy's mind, and it's his interpretations. Sometimes you might disagree with his interpretations, but you have to go with what he's got. You can't really start building anything else, which sometimes with certain characters, I'm like, dude. But at the same time, I understand, and as you read the book, you definitely get to learn a lot more about the character, but also you get to learn a lot more about the other characters through the main character's eyes, which is interesting because when anyone sees an individual, they have their own way of looking. So you're seeing it through this gentleman's eyes, and it's different.
You're being nice to him by calling him a gentleman.
Yes, I know. I'm not trying to give any spoilers away. Okay, you're trying to undermine my spoiler.
No, but that's one of the things that I think is interesting about this story is that perception is something that I've always thought was fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Our perceptions, they really define our reality.
Right.
And if you're looking at a reality that is evolving,
mm-hmm.
how does perception change?
Right.
And that's one thing that I have done with this series on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first book, his perception is very limited.
Right.
It's almost as if his senses aren't entirely awake.
Mm-hmm.
And as he goes through the world and grows to care more about certain things
mm-hmm.
and grows to hate other things,
right.
those perceptions really flavor the way he even thinks about stuff in the world.
Right, absolutely.
Because you're getting to see his perception. I mean, it's not just him writing about stuff that's going on. You're dealing with his prejudices,
mm-hmm.
which I think is fascinating.
It is. And sometimes I wish that he would act on certain things, but he's got to hold it back more. So you have the Saga of Ukumog, but you also have the Threads of Ukumog.
Yeah.
Okay, which is the first one is the bridge between the second and third book. So the question I have for you is, will there be more threads?
Yeah, there will.
Okay.
There will. Really, the Threads of Ukumog, when I was writing it, it didn't really fit into the main storyline.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the main character of the other books who's writing it. You're not locked to his perception.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing more of the world. And they are tiny threads from the main arc of the storyline.
Right.
And I wanted to present that
mm-hmm.
to people who were curious about the world and about the characters in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't want to put it just at the end of a book or what have you.
Right.
And I originally had intended for Shadow of the Pyramid to just be a short story
mm-hmm. that
I was going to put on my website for free.
Mm-hmm.
But once I reached a certain word count, my editor told me, "You've gone into novella territory,"
mm-hmm.
and I actually put it on my website in a secret spot and had a few friends actually kind of reading through it on their phone.
Yeah.
And it was so long, and the website wasn't really super great for mobile reading, especially if you had to save your place anywhere.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I got to make this into a Kindle book, and I made a paperback copy because there are just so many people, I fall into this category too, so many people who don't want to read electronically. They want the feel of a book, which is the reason why I make sure that I have everything in both formats for everybody who likes it. But about Threads of Ukumog, I don't know what else is going to be in it. I know, I know which characters I'm going to write about.
Okay.
I've already sort of plotted those out, and if more appear, then that's great.
Okay.
But I don't know if they'll all be novellas like this, or if some of them will be short stories. And I think eventually I'll probably put them in a collection and they'll be all together. Or I might, put a collection of like all these books with the 3 novels and then put the novella in there with them and create something like that. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do there. I'm a huge fan of the Elric Saga by Michael Moorcock. And the way I found the Elric Saga is that somebody gave me the first set of the novels in the series in this omnibus, and I devoured that thing. And I couldn't find the second part of it, so I got the individual little novels, and I was reading those, and that was just amazing. So having more flexibility in the way you read and the way things are packaged, I think is awesome.
Well, I personally have, of course, all the hard copies. I've also got all the Kindle versions. The only exception, I don't like to read electronically either, with the only exception being the Kindle, because it's e-ink. It's not, I'm not looking at a phone screen. That would bother the crap out of me, because I can actually take a Kindle outside in the sun and still be able to read it.
Yeah.
But like I said, I've got every single one of these in both formats.
Yeah.
Because
thanks.
I don't want to ruin these beautiful books, but I want to read them over again because there's stuff that you definitely miss the first time you read through it. All right, so here's the big question for you.
Okay.
What is your goal number of books?
I don't have one.
It's just going to keep going.
I don't think it'll keep going. The the series has a definitive ending point,
Mhm.
and I know where that story is generally going.
Okay.
You know, I haven't written the last chapter, and even if I did,
Mhm.
I would be flexible enough to change it depending on what happens
Right.
as I write the stuff in between.
Mhm.
But it's not something that's just going to be an ongoing series for forever. That's not the way any good story should be. It should have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right.
Now, where we are at the end of this book, I don't know if it's the middle. I don't think it is. I think we're still in the preamble of the story.
I agree.
Does that mean that there's 12 books in the series or 6 books in the series?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't have a plotted number for that.
Well, just so you know, so far, I want the series to continue on. I've read there's another author by the name of Janie Wertz.
Mm-hmm.
She wrote a series called I think it's like The War of Light and Dark.
Okay.
I think after the 4th book, it literally is the same story, but they change the location.
Yeah.
And they're like, and there's like a small little tweak to each one of the characters, but it's basically the same thing.
I don't think you're not going to have to worry about that with this.
Yeah. Yeah. So far, that's not even.
Yeah.
Because, well, the other thing is it basically centers around just 2 characters. In this series, I've been introduced to.
You gonna count them now?
No, I'm not going to try to count them. There's quite a few characters in this book. No,
Yeah.
don't even. Because if I start counting, then I'll start subtracting, and people don't need to know that I should be subtracting. So there's a lot of characters in there.
Well, I'll say it. You know, nobody's safe. I mean,
I know.
like you know, people talk about George R. R. Martin, and I've actually, you know, they talk about him with nobody's safe, no characters are safe,
Right.
and I think that life is a fragile thing, and that the loss of a character in a story can actually be more inspiring to the reader and to all the other characters in the story to actually take action when they might not have otherwise done so.
Right.
So it's not that I like torturing characters. It's not that I like watching them die. In fact, you know, there's a couple of characters in the series that have not made it to the end to this point in the series that I've been really sad to see go. But it felt right, you know, and it was appropriate the way things played out, and I really feel like their contribution to the story, both in their life and in their death, have changed the other characters in ways for good and bad, and that's good. I think the story's evolving. It's definitely not just a repeat of the same thing over and over again.
Well, the other thing is, it's not a. I mean, it may end up being a redemption story, but there's definitely, you know, pieces where perhaps the main character is in the wrong or in the right. You know, there's an equal, not I want to say equal, but there's definitely this slightly unknown quality to the story where you can have your opening opinions about a certain person or character or specific scene, but it could end bad or they could be bad. And it just, you know, it depends. It keeps you on your toes because you never know what's going to happen or how other people are going to intersect with others later on.
Well, it's again all about perception.
Right.
You know, the best villains all think they're the good guy.
Right. Absolutely. Right. Okay. So I think we've already kind of touched on this, but I'm going to ask the question to you anyways. What inspirations do you draw upon when you're writing this series?
Well, you know, we talked about the Elric saga, which, you know, people say was sort of the first anti-hero fantasy story, and there's a lot of that feeling, that dark feeling, and the unknown about is the main character good or bad. That exists there, but there's another author that I don't think gets enough credit that really inspired a lot of the work, really, and that's Glenn Cook. He wrote a series called The Black Company, and that really affected me. So, you know, that story and Michael Moorcock's story, and of course some H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe and all these guys inspired me to write this stuff. But when I'm actually writing, I listen to music, and I just kind of let it flow, really. You know, and I don't know if you're going to ask this question, but as far as my workflow is concerned, I tend to make a very rough outline of the story. I will say, okay, so this is my beginning point, this is my end point of the story, and really they're just bullet points. They're not fleshed out, they're beats. You know, like person A finishes the book by doing this and then possibly saying these words. And then I have the beginning part, which is usually determined by the previous book. Like, this is where we are. So I have to connect those two things, and I do so by saying, okay, chapter 1, what's the beat in this chapter? What's the beat in chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? And I usually leave an unknown space in between, and I just kind of see how it goes. And, you know, I didn't intend Flayed to be as big as it became. And, you know, I try to keep my books a little small because I want them to be more episodic, not these giant epics of 800 pages. But it got a little bit away from me. So
that's okay. I didn't mind. So when you're writing, you like you said, you do an outline, and then so as long as that flow, that beat continues, that end point that you want can kind of shift.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I don't nail anything down. Even once I've written something, when it's set in stone is the day I send it to my editor. That's the moment where I say, okay, this is how things are going to be. But until that point, I've moved scenes around. I've changed the way it's looked. I've changed major events. I've done things like that and rewritten portions of it. But I am an author who does not like to write one version of the manuscript and then go back through and cut it apart and put new scenes in and swap things around. I'd rather do it as I go through it. So to me, it's more of a smoothing process. You know, I'll write something and I might modify it a little bit and I'll smooth it out. And I'll write the next bit, and I'll smooth it out and make sure it jives with the first part. And then I'll write the third piece, and I'll do that, and I'll smooth it out, and I'll read through everything. And at that point, I might send the first piece to my editor so that she can start working on stuff while I'm in the process of writing. Because sometimes her feedback on the story while I'm in process is actually valuable because she'll have impressions or ideas about what's going on that I might need to either clarify or I might need to support somehow future-wise in the story. So, you know, I take her feedback and improve the story as it plays out. So that's valuable to me, you know. Like Stephen King used to say, or still does say, I think, that you should write a manuscript, you know, you hack it apart, you do all this stuff, you write it and then cut half the words, and then when you're finally done butchering this thing, you put it in a drawer and you don't read it, no one reads it for like a year, and then you pull the thing out and you read it and see if it's any good, and if it's not, you hack it apart again until it's ready to go, and then you put it again in a drawer, and then eventually someday you open up the drawer and you let someone else read it. I don't operate that way.
How many passes are you taking at this? Like an infinite amount, or
no? It's not an infinite amount. I will generally write through a section of the book, and then I'll read through it and make corrections. And in that pass is when I will usually find the major errors that need to be sort of reworked, and I'll fix them at that point. And then I might read through it again just to make, especially if I've done a lot of work to it, just to kind of make sure that it jives correctly. And then I'll set it aside and work on the next piece. So that's generally how I work. Like I said, I don't really write an extra 2,000 words for every chapter that I need to cut out. And more often than not, my editor tells me that I need to add some clarification here and there. Mostly because the style of this book specifically is that I want the pace of the book to match the observations that the character's making. And you know, you and I sitting in this room, we are making observations around us, but we're doing it at lightning speed. And if that doesn't translate to the way that the reader is seeing what's going on, then the pace is lost. So, you know, while books that have 200 or 20 pages written about a yellow dress or something along those lines, they have their place. It doesn't match this. So more often than not, my descriptions and such are downplayed to give you just enough information for you to create the world. And when she finds that there isn't enough information, then I'll add more.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, I'm purposefully not including a million details because I want you to be an active participant,
right,
in order to keep the pace of the story moving very
mm-hmm.
quickly.
Mm-hmm. I actually like that more than the like 5 pages of how the wood grain fills on the adventurer's hand as they're sitting in a dark tavern, and the color of the wine. I'm just like, oh my god, please just go.
Some people want to feel like they live in that world.
Right.
They want to know what the room smells like, what the wood feels
mm-hmm.
like, because they want to be there.
Right.
So I don't think that the readers of this series want to live in Rack's head forever.
No.
You know what I mean?
Right.
The world that he's in is a dark and terrible one.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were to describe every detail of the misery that's there, it would bog the story down quite a bit.
And make people very sad.
Yeah, and I don't want that.
Right.
I don't want that.
No, the thing is, there's enough detail in there that if you want to draw yourself into the story, it's open to interpretation where you can kind of fill in the blanks and it can become your own, your own view. The thing about certain authors that they basically, I understand that there's individuals out there who want to live in the world, but I feel like if you're shoveling all these specific details down my throat personally, I kind of lose momentum because I guess I have an active imagination. You walk in the room, you give me some of the stuff, and then my brain can kind of fill in the blanks. I don't need to know, which way the wood grain's going and all this stuff. You can tell me how it smells, what's on the table, what type of table it is, and let's go.
Yeah.
So, yes, I like that pacing. Of course, you kind of already answered this, but without giving spoilers, do you already know where the story will ultimately end?
Yes, roughly. The characters still have the chance to surprise me. They always so. Anything could happen, but at this moment, I think I know where the story is ultimately going to go.
And you're the only one who knows.
Yeah, one. I have told no one else.
No HBO executives know, just in case you die.
No,
like George R. R. Martin, which already got leaked.
I've written it into a wiki that I keep to keep track of all the characters and the world. That's a private wiki that I have. So if I were to die, somebody could get to my wiki and they could find out what's supposed to happen. But it's written at such a high level in there that literally the end is like one sentence of how things might end. And it might be very unsatisfying in its current form for someone to read that.
Gotcha.
But no, I have an idea about where everything's going.
All right, the next question. This actually might be the hardest question for you to answer.
Okay.
Because you are the author and you've created so many individuals within it. Is there a favorite character that you love to write about in your book?
There's a couple. I really, really, really like to write about Bryn. She is very interesting and very unpredictable. And what's really funny is that sometimes when I'm writing dialogue, because she's the unique profanity which exists within this world, she uses it constantly. And it's funny sometimes because my editor, there'll be a conversation between 3 or 4 characters, and they'll all be talking, and they'll be talking normally, and there'll be some he said, she said lines that tell you who's talking about what, and then another voice will come in, and it's usually a sentence that's filled with profanity, and she's like, "Who's the person speaking here?" It was like the actual speech pattern didn't tell you who it was, because she's terrible like that. But she's unpredictable. She is very, very unpredictable, and I like that. It makes it so that she's interesting even when I'm writing that character. And I think probably the Viking-like barbarian guys that you meet in book 2, they were fun to write, and I love actually writing all bad guys. They're super fun. All
right.
But I'd have to say that Bryn is the character I like writing the most. And what's hilarious is that she's also the most polarizing character of all the characters that are in the books. When I talk to people who've read the series, they either love her and think she's awesome, or they're so frustrated by her they just want to strangle her.
Yeah.
And I think that means that they have an emotional investment.
Absolutely. And I have to say that it depends on the situation with Bryn, where my emotions lie. Sometimes I'm like, no, stop. And other times like, all right, cool, okay, yeah, you actually have a heart.
Yeah.
But
when
yeah,
she's not murdering people. Yeah.
Well, sometimes when she's murdering people, it depends on the situation. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So on a non-writing question,
okay,
on topic, what do you actually do when you're not writing?
Well,
is there a time where you actually don't write?
Yeah, there's plenty of times that I don't write. I mean, I think any author will tell you that when we're often writing, that there's a lot of time where we're really suffering at the keyboard and trying to get words out. For me, I actually have a massive problem with anxiety, and I constantly second guess myself, and so I have to bridge that gap in order to be able to put words on the page. And so there are times that I am spinning around trying to write but not able to, and I distract myself with other things like playing video games or board games or what have you to try and loosen myself up a little bit so I don't care as much. And some days I'm more successful than others. But like many authors, you have to have a day job. But I've done very many things over the last 10 years. I worked in California in the movie business for a little while. I most recently have been working at a software company as a vice president of business operations and process improvement. Before that, I was a project manager. I have done all kinds of different things. I've worked in sales. So, I don't really feel like that's who I am. I really feel like, so there are people who have careers and there are people who have jobs. And people who have jobs generally aren't defined by it. People who have careers are generally defined by it. I feel like I'm a person that has two careers. I'm a creative person that does creative stuff. And because I've worked on games. I've done all kinds of stuff as far as that stuff is concerned as well. I've worked on movies. I've written tiny scripts for things. I've been an actor. All these creative elements have always been in my life. But at the same time, I'm also very focused on building companies and creating content and doing all these things for businesses. So I don't know. I'm a weird dual person that way. There's a TED Talk that talked about polymaths. That is a person that has multiple things that they're good at. It's really sort of a fancy word for a jack of all trades. And I probably would consider myself to be a polymath because there are some things which are constants, but there are a lot of other things which I'll work on, I'll get really kind of good at them, and I'll start to lose interest, and then I'll want to do something else. Which makes my resume look really fun.
I can see that. All right. Finally, the most important question to any of the viewers who are watching this interview. Where can you get the books?
Should I talk to you or should I talk to them?
Talk to them.
Okay, so the books are available in paperback and in ebook. You can get them all on Amazon. They're all there in both the Kindle format and in the paperback format. They're also available on the Google Play Store and the iTunes iBook Store. Save for Flayed at the moment. About April of this year, 2016, in case this sits on the internet for whoever knows long. This will be available roughly around the April timeframe on both of those stores. But until then, these three are the only ones that are available on those specific stores. You can also find me at some conventions here and there. I usually post what conventions I'm at on my website, which is Louis Puster III, the number 3.com, and I have a events page that's up whenever I do have events that are upcoming. I take that page down when there's nothing to look at on that. Yeah, you can also read my blog, which I post at very infrequently, but I sometimes talk about writing, sometimes talk about the process of developing characters or things that are in popular media, or sometimes I talk about myself a little bit. So if you're interested in that, you can find that stuff there too.
Awesome. Well, Louis, I want to thank you for coming on and letting me interview you about your amazing book series, and I hope that you write really quickly because I need to know what happens next. But
I tell you, Charlie. So I started writing the fourth book. Now this isn't a question you asked, but I started writing the fourth book.
Yeah.
And I had an outline that I wrote, and everything was sort of plotted out, and I keep my outlines rather loose. And I started writing the first chapter, and Rack decided he did not want to do anything that happens in that outline. So that doesn't mean that the process will be slow. It just means that I don't know what's going to happen right next at the moment.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I have to just keep with my conspiracy theories.
Yeah. It'd be good, though, if you had some more people to conspire with. So people should...
Yes, I know. People seriously start reading these books so I can talk to you, because I really need to run a couple ideas off you, because running them off of him, he ain't going to tell me jack.
No spoilers.
I know.
No spoilers.
I know. I tried very hard at this past convention, but it didn't work. So anyways, thank you, Louis, for coming on. And,
thanks for having me.
And once again, check out the books, and hopefully we can get you on in the future. And of course, anytime that you want to hop on the show, just, give you a heads up and you can be our guest. But anyways, thank you for tuning in to the Ultra Confusion interview of Louis Puster III and the Saga of Ukumog. Hopefully you enjoyed what you saw.